Some sociologists argue that changes in the way pupils are assessed have favoured girls and disadvantaged boys. Stephen Garrard found the gender gap in achievement was constant from 1975 until 1988 to 1989, where it increased sharply. This was the year that GCSE was introduced under the Conservatives as part of the Educational Reform Act. Coursework became a major part of nearly all subjects. Garrard argued that the gender gap in achievement was a product of the changed system of assessment, not the general failing of boys. Mitsos and Brown support this view. They argue that girls are more successful in coursework because they are more conscientious and better organised than boys. Girls spend more time on their work, take more care the way it is presented. They're better at meeting deadlines and bring the right equipment and materials to lessons. This has been criticised because some sociologists argue that asserting that girls do better in coursework is saying that there's something innately different about girls and innately that they're more organised. However, socialisation differences can also explain why girls may be better at coursework, because they are socialised to be more organised. Mitsos and Brown, however, argue that girls gain from maturing earlier than boys and from their ability to concentrate for longer. So Mitsos and Brown actually do insinuate that there is something biological inherent in girls, and this is why they achieve better. Along with GCSE has come the greater use of oral exams. This is also said to benefit girls because of their better developed language skills. Most sociologists argue that these characteristics and skills aren't due to biological differences, but are mostly due to gender role socialization in the family. Girls are more likely to be encouraged to be neat, tidy, and patient, rather than be that way biologically. Jeanette Elwood argues that although coursework does have some influence, it is not the main cause or the only cause of the gender gap. She analysed the weighting of coursework and written exams, and she argued that exams have more influence on final grades. In fact, if you look at the weighting in the past and presently, exams have a larger weighting than coursework. Selection and league tables also have a clear impact on gender and achievement. So we're now looking basically at the impact of marketisation policies on how girls and boys are viewed by schools. As you already know, marketisation policies and league tables has led to selection by the back door, where schools with limited amounts of places interview students and decide on whether those students can come to the school. Schools generally see girls as more desirable recruits because they achieve better exam results. Jackson argued that the introduction of league tables has improved opportunities for girls. High-achieving girls are attractive to schools, whereas low-achieving boys are not. Roger Slee found that boys are less attractive to schools because they are more likely to suffer from behavioural problems and 4 times more likely to be excluded. Boys are seen as liability students who give schools a rough image and deter high-achieving girls from applying. So despite some debate about whether there are still stereotypes in the curriculum, It has been argued that the removal of gender stereotypes has had a clear impact on girls' achievement. In the 70s and 80s, researchers found that women were portrayed in narrow roles. They were mainly seen as housewives and mothers. Physics books showed them as frightened or amazed by science, and maths books depicted boys as more inventive than girls. Many argue that this has removed a barrier to girls' achievement. Gabby Weiner argues that since the 1980s, teachers have challenged stereotypes. Sexist images have been removed from learning materials, and this has helped to raise girls' achievements by presenting them with more positive images of what women can do. There are now more positive role models for girls within the school, as well as in the home. In 1992, in nursery and primary schools, 50% of women were head teachers. In 2005, that had risen to 66%. In 1992, 81% of women were teachers in nursery and primary schools, and by 2005, this had risen to 84%. In secondary schools, a different picture emerges, but there are still increases in the amount of women role models. In 1992, 22% of women were 22% of head teachers were women in secondary schools. In 2005, this had risen to 35% of women of head teachers. In 1992, 49% of teachers in secondary school were women, and that had increased to 56% in 2005. Interestingly, despite there being a higher proportion of women teachers, this is not reflected in the percentages of women in management and leadership roles, such as head teachers. Sewell argued that primary schools are feminized. There are many females within primary schools, and in fact there is a lack of male role models. And as a result of this, each gender sees school as part of their area, as part of their gender domain. Girls feel more at home in the school environment than boys, and this has led to girls doing better. The fact that there are more women, female head teachers, means that they provide a clear role model for girls. Girls can see that women can achieve positions of importance, and this gives them non-traditional goals to aim for. To become a teacher, the individual must go through a lengthy and successful education themselves. Girls realise that in order to be successful, they need to gain educational qualifications, and this gives them motivation to do so. Teacher retention and labelling also has an effect. Previously, we looked at how teacher attention and labelling had a negative impact because girls received less attention. However, the limited amount of attention that girls receive is not always a bad thing. There have been several studies that have looked at teacher attention in depth and looked at the different types of attention that teachers give to girls and boys. Jane and Peter French analysed classroom interaction, and they found that the amount of attention teachers paid to boys and girls for academic reasons was actually similar. Boys only received more attention because they attracted more reprimands. Becky Francis also found that indeed boys got more attention, but they were also disciplined more harshly and felt picked on by teachers who tended to have lower expectations of them. Similarly, Joan Swan and David Goodall found that boys are generally more boisterous and attract the teacher's gaze more often than girls. As a result, they get more opportunity to speak. But they found that the way teachers interacted with girls was often more positive because it focused on schoolwork rather than behaviour. Swan also found differences in communication styles. Boys dominate whole class discussion, whereas girls prefer pair work and group work and are better at listening and cooperating. When working in groups, girls' speech involves turn-taking and not the hostile interruptions that often characterize boys' speech. This may explain why teachers respond more positively to girls, whom they see as cooperative, than to boys, who they see as potentially disruptive. This may lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy in which successful interactions with girls promote girls' self-esteem and raise their achievement levels. Whilst we're looking particularly here at studies that relate to girls, you can also relate some of the previous studies that we've looked at when considering class and differential achievement, such as Hargreaves and Becker, the ideal pupil. Could be argued that girls are more likely to be seen as the ideal pupil, for instance. So now we've looked at why girls are outdoing boys in most levels of education. Things do become more equal at university. However, feminists argue that girls are actually still unequal and that more should be done to help girls in the education system. Radical feminists argue that despite changes, schools are still sites of patriarchal control. Schools teach females that they are submissive and that men are still in control. And feminists use the term the hidden curriculum to explain this. Much of the next few slides that follow will be looking at the impact of the hidden curriculum and subject choice on girls and their educational achievements. Feminists argue that sexual harassment of girls continues at school. Girls are limited by their subject choices and career options. And although there are more female head teachers, male teachers are still more likely to become heads of secondary schools. Women are underrepresented in many areas of the curriculum. For example, their contribution to history is largely ignored, and Weiner describes the secondary school history curriculum as a woman-free zone. It is androcentric. It is focused on the experiences of men. Although the introduction of the national curriculum reduced pupils' freedom to choose or drop subjects by making most subjects compulsory until 16, there are still clear inequalities in terms of subject choice. Where choice is possible, boys and girls tend to follow different gender routes through the education system, and there are some clear gender differences in subject choices. This occurs particularly at AS and A level, and also in terms of vocational qualifications. Stables and Whiteley found that where there is a choice in the national curriculum, girls and boys choose differently. Design and technology is a compulsory subject. Girls tend to choose food technology, whereas boys tend to choose graphics and resistant materials. Gendered subject choices become more noticeable after GCSE. So if we look at the percentage of males sitting subjects like computing at A level, it is 90% compared to 10%. Physics is 78% compared to 22%. Further maths is 71% compared to 29%. Subjects like history are more equal. Biology is often seen as a female science, with 41% of girls sitting at A level. 41% of males sitting at A level compared to 59% girls. English is 69% girls compared to 31% males. And sociology is 70% females compared to 24% males. All subjects at A level are 52% females and 48% males.